Hi, I'm Joe Walensky, Program Manager for Seattle's annual User Experience Conference called ConveyUX, and that's coming up February 27, 28, and March 1, and I get to chat with our many presenters. Today I'm talking with Allie Cahill. Hello, Allie. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Joe. Doing well. Recovering from a little cold, but I think I'm holding it together.
Well, I appreciate you still taking the time to get together with me on this. Where are you talking to us from today?
So I live in New York City. Capital One has a pretty big office here, but I find myself working from home a lot of days lately because I have a 10-month-old son. So life is kind of totally different with him in the picture. So I'm trying to balance that and work and make it all happen.
Well, so I doubly appreciate you taking the time to do this preview with having your hands full for that. And I thought a good place to start would be with your background and the types of things that you do at Capital One.
Yeah, so I've been at Capital One, I think it's like 5.5 years now, which is actually the longest I've ever spent at a company. So it kind of feels like forever. But I joined because I was working at a small startup here in New York City that was trying to compete with Yelp. We ranked and rated merchants based on credit card spending data. So a lot of my team were data scientists, PhDs in like machine learning and very technical folks. And so my role in that world was to bring in like the customer experience side of things. So like, hey, we have all this great data. We know a lot about people. How can we use that to actually help whoever out in the world, right? And who are our customers? Like we had all sorts of questions on like the customer experience side, but we knew a lot on the data side. So I was on a 12-person team there that Capital One heard about and ended up buying us. And so that was a really neat experience to go from a really small startup to a huge company. I personally loved it. About half the team ended up leaving because they were more interested in a startup environment. But I was excited to find when I joined Capital One a design team that was really starting to grow. It was a smaller team, and in the past like 5.5 years, I think we've gone from like 50 people to like 500 people. I mean, really exponentially have grown, and that's been super exciting, particularly because I've seen Capital One really embrace a customer-first approach to their way of doing business. Banks tend to have a ton of jargon, and it's all about like APR and like terms that nobody really knows or understands, which makes it so much harder for customers to be happy and healthy with their finances. And so I feel like as a design team, we're real customer advocates, and we now have a seat at the table with product and tech, and there's a lot of data folks at Capital One as well. And we all work together to figure out the best customer experience that also meets business needs. And so it's been pretty cool seeing the company change and evolve and putting customers first, and going after this mission of changing banking for good, which is again about putting the customer first. I actually joined Capital One in a product role because that's the role I was doing at the startup. And it's interesting because my title kind of moved around a lot. I then joined the design team and was called a UX content strategist for a while. Then we had a conversation design team. So there's been a lot of evolution and changes in the way we've kind of talked about our work. But for me, it's always been the same work. It's advocating for the customer, getting out there, talking to customers, looking at the data to figure out how what we're hearing is actually represented in our customer base, and then partnering with tech and product to kind of bring new experiences to life. So it's been a really cool journey. It feels like almost a new job like every year, but that's been exciting, and I've worn a bunch of different hats, and I kind of look forward to continuing to do that.
Well, it's yeah, it's great to hear of such a progressive story of growth in a financial institution, and we'll definitely looking forward to having you here at the conference. And your topic that you're going to present is called "Designing a Human Conversation." So why don't you talk about that briefly and let us know what we can expect from that?
Yeah. So. I wasn't totally sure what to call the talk, but I landed on designing a human conversation because there's been so much talk in the industry and at Capital One as well about using AI, right? So essentially, Capital One launched, it was like last year, a chat bot that's powered by AI. But the big challenge is, like, how do you make a chat bot feel human, right? Where you feel like you're having a conversation with somebody. In our case, it's called Eno, and it's a character. But you want that conversation and that relationship to build and feel super trusting and like, an honest, kind of healthy relationship. And so human just kind of comes out a lot. Like, you don't want an experience like this conversation. We wouldn't want to feel robotic. We want it to kind of go back and forth and understand that we're understanding each other. And so I've spent a lot of time lately thinking about how to design in partnership with like AI, or essentially like technology, like models, like algorithms that are helping serve up certain experiences. And that's kind of a new, interesting challenge. But I think the core goal of designing a conversation is like super foundational to any experience, whether you're working on a chatbot or an app or whatever, like whatever the channel, it's like foundational to try to get the right message to the right person at the right time. And that's super challenging, right? Especially when you have like a Capital One, we have like, I guess it's like 40, I don't even know the latest count, like 40 million customers or something like that, like a lot of customers. So how do we design an experience that feels personal to like me, Allie Cahill, as a customer, or you, Joe, as a different customer? And like, we don't have, 40 million employees who can write and design each of those conversations. So there's been a lot of work, like, for me to partner with the data and tech folks to understand what the capabilities are, what data do we need to include in a model to get to the experiences we want to serve up. So it's been really interesting, and what I was excited to share was just kind of talk a little bit more about that process we've put together. Like, how do we go about thinking about defining a model? Like, how do we bring in research, what we learned in research, to define like typologies, and then how do we work with data folks to identify them in our customer base, and then how do we kind of go back and forth that way to look at how customers are responding to stuff we're putting out there, and how are we tweaking the experience based on what we're learning. And we're trying to do a lot of experimentation, and it's been interesting because that's also not a way big companies generally work, like throwing things out there and being like, let's see how it goes. Like, not everybody's so comfortable with that. So that's also been a learning curve that I can talk about a little bit.
Well, thanks for taking the time to chat with me about this today, and this gives great preview of the types of things that you'll be talking about when you make the journey from New York to Seattle, and we'll see you in a couple of months.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Joe.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.